conspiracy theory pedophiles, I guess.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I would like to call the December 13th, 2022 Longmont City Council study session to order. As a reminder to the public, you can live stream this at www.longmontcolorado.gov. Or you can use the city's YouTube channel at longmontpublicmedia.org or Comcast channels 8 or 880. Dawn, can we have the roll call, please?
Absolutely. Mayor Peck.
Present.
Councilmember Hidalgo Faring.
Here.
Councilmember Martin.
Here.
Councilmember McCoy.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Waters. Councilmember Yarbrough.
Here.
Mayor, you have a full house.
Full house. Stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I've had a lot of questions. I am not ill. I'm wearing this mask so that I don't carry any bugs to my grandson when I see him next week. So, you know, those little guys, for some reason, they're having a real bad time this year with all kinds of things affecting them. So we have right now a special report and a presentation. It's going to be a donation. Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. I was so excited about this presentation that I talked to Chris about. I just wanted to go do it. So we have motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to the future agendas. Do we have any from City Council? Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Yes, in October, the staff presented the council with a statement of policy on firearms regulation for the city council to consider and revise. And I would like to move that that on a future study session or as a general business item, we actually consider that, that document and I hope adopt it.
What's the motion?
This is the motion on, a motion to consider the statement presented by the staff to the city council in October on city policy versus regarding firearms.
Second that motion.
Okay, so that's been made by Councilor Martin, seconded by Councilor Waters. Do we have any discussion? Councilor Waters, are you for this? Okay, that's for something else. All right, let's vote. So that carried 6-1. I forgot we had 7 people now with Councilor McCoy in opposing. So, Councilor Waters, you're up.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Just a comment and then maybe a question and then a motion. The comment would be this. Of all the things that we're obligated to do this as council members, attending meetings would be high on that list. And then maybe the only other thing we're obligated to do is the performance appraisal for the city manager, for the city attorney, and for the judge. And Judge Fricks, for a variety of reasons, that process is going to be a little different than what we do with the city manager, or what councils do with the city manager and the city attorney. And I mentioned this last week, that we had, as we went through the process this year, we had some conversation with HR Director Joanne Zayas about the process and some improvements to the process. And it's my recollection that Joanne said in December we would be in, she would come back to us with some recommendations in terms of process revision. And I mentioned this last week. And we have one more meeting this month, and I don't see anything on that agenda regarding this topic. So could I just ask the question and then make a motion?
Why don't you make the motion?
I'll make the motion.
And then we'll discuss it.
I'll make the motion and then can I tag on the question?
Correct.
So the motion's going to be that we direct, I guess in this case we'd be directing the city manager to bring back a process from HR with what recommendations or not, but so what we could take a look at a process that makes more sense than what I've experienced in the 5 years I've been on the council. The question that would be, am I the only one that cares about this or thinks we need to make the improvement?
So do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
All right. So it's been moved by Councilor Waters, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, that we direct staff to bring back the process that, for the appraisals for our three, Judge Frick, city attorney, and city manager. Was that the question?
That was the motion.
So we're good. Okay, is there any discussion? I see none. Let's vote. And that carried unanimously. Thank you. So now we are back on the right schedule. Public invited to be heard. The public's invited to be heard. Anyone wishing to speak at first call, public invited to be heard, will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at the first call, public invited to be heard. And each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, giving us your name and address. So after we have done that, we are already, this is the shortest agenda I've seen in a very long time.
Don't jinx it.
Oh, sorry. I think I may have jinxed that, right. Well, I think that we are going to the,
First person, public.
yeah, we're going to go right to public invited to be heard. I still want to have that special presentation first. So the first person on the list is Naomi Kurland.
There? Okay. Good evening. I'm Naomi Kurland, and I live at 2073 Goldfinch Court. I serve on the board of Sustainable Resilient Longmont and chair their Zero Waste Committee, and I'm here tonight in support of council pursuing a universal recycling ordinance. SRL is excited to see the city follow up on the goals set forth this year in the updated Zero Waste Resolution by developing policy to reach those waste diversion goals. And we believe that a universal recycling ordinance is a smart first step in this direction. Our residential diversion rate is the second highest in the state, but we have yet to tackle the commercial sector, which is responsible for a large chunk of our city's overall waste. Universal recycling is a basic standard that many neighboring municipalities have adopted, and we're glad that staff is providing policy options for both recycling and composting solutions in this ordinance. We hope that policy development around composting and green waste will help spur collective action to build regional composting and green waste infrastructure on the Front Range. As the executive director of Longmont Food Rescue, I was also happy to see provisions included for food donation as well as composting to make the most of vital nutritional resources in our community. SRL and our Zero Waste Committee look forward to hearing the discussion tonight on the initial draft of a Longmont Universal Recycling Ordinance, and we urge Council to continue to direct staff to move forward on this important piece of legislation that will make a huge impact on our city's sustainability goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. Lance Whitaker?
Mayor and Council, my name is Lance Whitaker. I live at 1750 Collier Street, Longmont, Colorado. Been a 40-year resident of Longmont. I come to appeal on behalf of HB 191230. It's been almost 3 years now that this bill has been in law. I would hope that mayor and council can catch up to this law and hopefully enact some sort of ordinance within some sort of time frame relatively quick. Today is also National Hot Cocoa Day. So seeing as how it's so cold out, I hope everybody has a nice hot cocoa when they get home, seeing as how we have such a short agenda. Thank you.
Thank you,
and have a
Lance.
nice day.
Ryan Call.
Good evening, Longmont City Council. My name is Ryan Call, and I live at 1811 South Quebec Way in Denver. And I work on policy and community engagement at EcoCycle. I'm grateful to have already met with several of you, alongside Naomi with Sustainable Resilient Longmont, and listened to your perspectives on recycling and composting. As many of you know, EcoCycle does all things zero waste and has a long history in and with the city of Longmont. We educate students at all the public schools in the St. Vrain Valley School District through our Green Star Schools program. We operate the Boulder County Recycling Center, where Longmont's single-stream recyclables are processed. And we also process your hard-to-recycle materials at our Center for Hard-to-Recycle Materials, or CHARM. We work closely with Longmont staff and organizations to create and advocate for policies that optimize sustainable waste management and recovery systems. First off, we applaud Longmont City Council and staff for moving forward with a universal recycling ordinance. Such a policy will benefit Longmont residents, local businesses, and the planet. Regarding the details of the proposed ordinance, when EcoCycle's hauling department first met alongside other haulers about the proposed universal recycling ordinance, we were concerned that the policy would put the responsibility on haulers to offer recycling and compost collections along with a trash service. If the ordinance required trash haulers to bundle their trash, recycling, and compost collection, it would unfairly and unwisely force smaller and specialized haulers out of business here. EcoCycle is one of a few haulers that only provide recycling and composting services to businesses. About 25% of our hauling businesses here in Longmont, and our clients contract with separate haulers to collect trash. We do not haul trash to the landfill, and the original proposal would have locked us and other smaller haulers out of business in Longmont. This model would also limit new recycling and organic waste businesses from competing here. However, we're glad to see that the updated ordinance documents appear to have been revised to place the responsibility and the choice on the commercial entity instead. We believe that it's good for Longmont to put the responsibility for complying with any future recycling and composting ordinance on commercial properties. Businesses and multifamily buildings should be able to choose which haulers work best for them, and sometimes that means mixing and matching service providers. Also, when more options are available, the competition lowers prices. The mix and match hauler model is how commercial waste management works in the city of Boulder, and we believe it will be a good fit for here in Longmont as well. Since EcoCycle first started collecting recycling here in the late 1970s, Longmont has grown and become a leader in sustainability. We're glad to have a partner with Longmont over the years and look forward to continuing to work on all things zero waste for decades to come. Thank you for your time and for listening to my perspective.
Thank you, Ryan. Richard Showers.
Mayor, City Council, my name is Richard Showers. I live at 1100 East 17th Avenue. And I'd like to thank you all for your quick response to my email that I sent about a month ago regarding the speeding of traffic on my crossing guard corner at 14th and Francis. When I became a crossing guard about 3 years ago, I thought I was going to be a crossing guard stopping traffic that was going 20 miles an hour and paid attention. And over the years, I found that I was wrong about that. Traffic typically runs about 35 to 50 miles an hour. And often when I'm in the middle of the road holding up my sign, crossing these precious children across the street, people won't even see me and blow right past me. And it's a concern. About 3 weeks ago, I got an invitation to attend a meeting at DDA with Kimberly regarding Zero Vision. With regards to pedestrian safety and traffic mitigation. And I told them, I said, you know, we don't have to wait. We're all empowered and we can do something ourselves. And so I wanted to do something myself. And so I wrote you all a letter. And I wrote Harold, city manager, a letter, and Harold right away responded to me. And he forwarded my letter and my email to Jeff Sater. I talked to Jeff Sater for about 20 minutes on the phone. I had these ideas that we could put these traffic automatic ticket things up there, ticket cameras, and he educated me a little bit, but he didn't stop there. He sent my email to Kyle, the new transportation person. Kyle put up a data collector this week to see how fast traffic was going. Also Wayne Rafferty, who's the school resource officer over at Longs Peak Middle School. When I was there this morning, I looked and I saw these red and blue lights sitting in the middle of the road down on Francis Street, and I thought, what's going on down here? And I realized that he was just being a presence. I don't want to waste city resources, and I'm looking for a way to deal with pedestrian safety and traffic. It's out of hand. There seems to be a lot of disregard and disrespect for pedestrians, and you know, I appreciate what you all did, and I hope we can find a solution to, you know, change the culture, you know, put it inside people's heads somehow. I don't know if Zero Vision's the way, but somehow we've got to impress upon people how important it is to just take a breath and slow down. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So that is all the people, the residents that have signed up. Is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak at Public Invited to be Heard? Seeing none, I will close first call, Public Invited to be Heard. And now we are at our special reports and presentations. So I'd like to call Jeff Sater to the podium. Or whoever else wants to come up and present this would be great.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and Longmont City Council members. My name is Ashley Kasperzak. I reside at 3130 Tradewind Court in Loveland, Colorado. I'm employed as the development manager for UC Health Longs Peak Hospital Foundation, and I'm based at UC Health Longs Peak Hospital, located at 1750 East Ken Pratt Boulevard, Longmont, Colorado 80504, in case you needed to have that since I'm speaking. Also, I'm the president of the Longmont Twin Peaks Rotary Club, which is a local nonprofit organization. We provide service to others, promote integrity, and advance world understanding, goodwill, and peace through fellowship of business, professional, and community leaders. Tonight, I'm here to present a donation to the Longmont Police Department on behalf of a small group of anonymous donors called Ben's Club. Many of those donors are members of Twin Peaks Rotary Club. When I first heard about this group, I thought it was pretty cool that they saw a need and also were not limited. Many people stop themselves from making donations directly to cities because it's not nonprofit, tax deductible, but this group decided this was the way to address a community problem. Ben's Club is an informal association of donors. Many of them experienced economic and social disadvantages early in life, but they've been fortunate to overcome these challenges through hard work and the generosity of others. The organization's name is derived from Benjamin Franklin, whose portrait, of course, is on the $100 bill. Donors are encouraged to donate in increments of $100, and gift card distributions are typically made to people in need in $100 amounts. Thanks to these forward-thinking community members, they are able to, and the Twin Peaks Rotary Club is helping, be a conduit to make a donation to Longmont Police Department. This allows police officers to assist residents in great need. Through a simple nomination and review process, gift cards are given to the officers who then distribute those gift cards to local residents. The objectives of Ben's Club are to support individuals who are in crisis, recognize and support the important role police staff play in our community, and build bridges between members of the community and police staff. We believe that these efforts benefit people in great need and also all of Longmont. While respecting recipients' confidentiality, Chief Jeff Sater has shared stories of those who have benefited from gift cards. And it's 76 so far, 76 residents, but I'm going to share with you 3 stories. The first officer said, While pulling into the public safety parking lot, I noticed a woman parked at the entrance. Her car had just broken down. I checked on her and learned that she recently lost her 4-month-old baby to sudden infant death syndrome. Her husband serves in the military and is stationed out of state. She said that her family's bills were accumulating, and with a car just broken down, it was another cost to worry about. I am requesting funds to assist her with whatever basic supplies she may need. Officer 2, I've been working with a victim of an at-risk elder abuse case. The victim had checks stolen and fraudulently used, resulting in 2 of her accounts being closed. She disclosed to me that she's on a limited fixed income. Her husband had a leg amputated this week, and her hot water heater broke. She couldn't afford to fix it, she's struggling at the moment, and a gift card could lift her up. That's an example of when it rains, it pours. Officer 3, I had a domestic violence victim come forward tonight after struggling to report the abuse for quite some time. It ultimately ended in the arrest of her abuser. The male is the only one who works in the house and provides for her and their 2 children, ages 8 and 12. He uses being the sole provider for their household as a way to control and manipulate her. With him now being arrested, this will certainly complicate things for her even more. Especially with 2 children and the holidays coming, any gift card amount would certainly help them. So again, these are just a few of the 76 people assisted to date. I would like to now present a check to Chief Jeff Satter. We have a $2,500 check, and we're looking at ways to formalize this so that it can be an ongoing process. Thank you.
Yes, please.
One, two, three.
Congratulations. Absolutely, you have to.
I just want to thank the Rotary and all our donors that have contributed to this. We're well over $25,000, I think, that's been collected over about 3 years. And we've since upped it to $200, and sometimes that doesn't seem like enough, so we have flexibility to increase the amounts, but it's a great program. The officers love being able to give back and help. And our community and the business donors are just, they're exceptional and they're very generous, and we appreciate very much, so thank you.
Thank you. And I would just like to say the 2 gentlemen who did not want to be in the photo, I just want to give a shout out to their leadership in getting this program going. Thank you very much. So we're now on to our study session item. The first one is the draft universal recycling ordinance discussion. Lisa Noblock, our sustainability coordinator.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor Peck and members of council. I'm Lisa Knobloch, the Sustainability Manager with Strategic Integration. Oh, there we go. Hope you all are doing well tonight. All right, so I'm here to chat with you all this evening about the progress that we've been making on the Universal Recycling Ordinance that we discussed when we were with you last September with the Zero Waste Resolution. So just a quick overview of the 4 directives that council gave us in 2021, focusing on our zero waste efforts. The 4 general focus areas are education and outreach, which is primarily looking at the Green Star Schools program, increasing opportunities for hard-to-recycle programs, updating the zero waste resolution, which you all did in September, and then a focus on the universal recycling ordinance, which we'll be talking with you about tonight. A reminder of the guiding principles that we've been working under during this process, that everybody lives in a clean and safe community, increasing access to recycling and composting for all, and that reducing waste supports our climate action goals. As a reminder, for you all who participated in this, and then I know we have a new council member tonight as well, you all adopted an updated zero waste resolution in September 2022, which added new and ambitious goals for waste diversion of 75% by 2030 and 95% by 2050. And just for reference, our diversion rate as of the end of 2021 was about 34%. Through that process of establishing the zero waste resolution, we worked with a consultant to do a data analysis to model a number of different potential waste diversion strategies to understand which ones would be the most impactful in helping us reach those ambitious goals. They modeled a bunch of strategies, and the ones that are listed here are the ones that are really coming to the top of the list in terms of impact for waste diversion. And you can see they fall into three general bucket areas, which are the commercial sector, residential, and construction and demolition. The percentages listed at the top represent if all of these strategies were implemented under ideal conditions, that's what we could potentially see from a waste diversion impact standpoint from those areas. And you can really see, as I think somebody mentioned from the public invited to be heard, there's a lot of opportunity for impact in the commercial sector. And that's really where the Universal Recycling Ordinance focuses, is mandatory recycling for all businesses, composting for food-related businesses, and then a focus on the multifamily sector and supporting small businesses in that transition. So as we mentioned during the zero waste resolution, we've also been doing a lot of stakeholder engagement through this process to make sure that our resolution and the subsequent universal recycling ordinance really reflects the needs and priorities of our community. So these are all the folks that we have been engaging with throughout this process, and the ones in bold are the ones that we've been getting feedback, particularly on the components of the universal recycling ordinance as the folks that'll be impacted most by these requirements. So the proposal that you all will see tonight reflects that feedback that we've heard from those partners, in addition to that information from the data analysis. And I just want to note that through this process, in general, we heard broad support for these requirements from all the folks that we've talked to. We did hear some general comments and concerns that are largely around costs and the cost impacts, particularly for small businesses. Folks did note that any additional cost is just challenging for them to incur. There's a lot of need and desire for additional education and awareness around both recycling and composting to make sure that folks know how to do that properly. Folks generally are really interested in that, but there's still a lot of confusion about what can and can't be recycled, what can and can't be composted, and folks are interested in having some additional education and support from the city on that. There's some concerns around space constraints for existing multifamily buildings and some businesses as well, and then just some general concerns around things like illegal dumping and contamination. So those are some items that we would need to also look at from a city support standpoint in order to make these requirements and the rollout of these requirements successful for our commercial and multifamily sectors. So I'm going to get into the recycling components that you saw in your packets. I just want to highlight that I want to go through both the recycling and the organics or composting proposals before getting direction from you all, but I just want to highlight the areas that we'll be seeking direction are those requirements, the exemptions, and the timeline. Sorry, I'm not sure what's happening with the formatting on some of that there, but hopefully you can see it okay. Feel free to ask any clarifying questions, but I want to go through the slides and then we'll come back to these and discuss feedback from you all on those details. So in the recycling requirements, what we would be looking at is all businesses and large multifamily properties would be required to subscribe to recycling service that's commensurate with generation, and that's an important component. So that's saying that you can't just sign up for the cheapest and smallest possible recycling service and call it good. That would have to match the level of generation that your site is producing. that there's convenient access to bins, that there's signage that is bilingual, that has symbology associated and is ADA accessible to, again, help folks make sure that they're doing that properly. And then again, as I mentioned, employee training and tenant awareness. The exemptions, and this came through both our research into what other communities have done, as well as that stakeholder engagement process, are to exempt folks that generate less than 96 gallons of trash per week, so generally small producers, folks that either self-haul or share recycling dumpsters already, people experiencing economic hardship, inadequate space to add additional recycling dumpsters, and all other efforts to downsize other bins have been explored. And then identifying an innovation. So we want to make sure there's space if people are identifying opportunities to upcycle their recyclables, that we want to allow for that. There's asterisks noted next to each of those because those details have not yet been determined. We wanted to have this conversation with you all before really defining each of those things and then determining a process for how people would apply for an exemption and verify those exemptions to us. The general timeframe for recycling would be in 2023, the first half of 2023, we would finalize and approve a universal recycling ordinance with you all. And then we'd really move into that education and awareness period. So really spend the bulk of 2023 making sure that folks know this requirement is coming, who's going to be impacted, what does it entail, setting up that process for exemptions, establishing some sort of financial assistance and an opportunity or a process for people to apply for that assistance. And then in 2024, move into these requirements taking effect. And we listed two options for you all here. If you want to phase things in a little bit quicker, what we're proposing is that in January, you could have this requirement start for larger premises. So premises with 75 plus dwelling units, or businesses with 10,000 plus square feet. These are some examples from some other communities we saw. I noted those in red because those are really things that you all can modify if you want to modify those particular numbers. And then all other commercial properties would be required to begin recycling in June of 2024. Or you could not do the January and just go to all businesses or all commercial properties in June of 2024. Throughout that process, we would have ongoing education and support for folks, the exemption process, financial assistance, and we wouldn't really get into enforcement until June of 2025. So really trying to give people ample time to really get the support and the resources they need to foster compliance. So we really want to bring people along in this process so they feel invested in helping us meet our community's zero waste goals, rather than come straight out with heavy fines right at the beginning. So that's part of what we heard from the engagement process, is that people are interested in doing this, but they need some time to adjust to the cost and figure out the logistics. I also just want to note those blue boxes on the side is when the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act passed by the state last year also goes into effect. So in January of 2023, a bag fee goes into place for select businesses, and then a plastic bag ban beginning in January of 2024, and a polystyrene ban in June of 2024, again, for select businesses, so not everybody. But I just wanted to note those things so that you can see that there's also requirements that are going to be coming down from the state that some of these same businesses are going to have to comply with. And then moving into the organic sector, so the requirements here would be that commercial organic generators must divert food scraps from back-of-house operations through either commercial composting service or other means. And the focus is here on food businesses first, followed by other green waste when a regional composting infrastructure is available. That's really because through the data analysis process, we saw that in the commercial sector in particular, food waste is the bigger impact. And we know that composting or organics diversion can be quite costly, and when we have a regional infrastructure available, hopefully that would make that more economically feasible for folks. And so we're looking at pushing that green waste, so like landscapers, a little bit further down the timeline. The exemptions for organics would be the same as recycling. The list of businesses that would be impacted are listed here. And then the general timeline, again, would be in June. That's when recycling would take effect. And similarly, we would spend in 2024, in June, that's when recycling would take effect. And then we would spend a good bit of time doing the education and awareness, getting the exemption process set up, the application for financial assistance. And then in 2025, the organics requirements would take into effect. And again, there's two options here. So in January, you could start with the bigger entities like food wholesalers, distributors, manufacturers, and grocery stores, and then all other businesses in June, or you could do all businesses at one time in June. And then again, the enforcement wouldn't begin until a year later in 2026, with a lot of that support for education, awareness, financial assistance, again, to help foster compliance, because we really want folks to be able to comply rather than need to apply for an exemption. And then landscaping requirements in 2029. And then the last item, this is really an option for council to consider, is we didn't specify a date here, that if you wanted to include all other businesses or certain other businesses or multifamily properties in the requirement and the organics requirements, you could also add those. The data analysis modeling that we did was modeled just looking at food permitted businesses, largely because, as we've seen in other communities that have had the requirements on all businesses for composting, there's a lot of folks that have very minimal. They have some food scraps from employee meals and they have some paper towels, but they just don't generate enough compostable waste to really warrant requiring composting service. And then multifamily, there's just a lot of issues with regards to contamination. So those are just something to consider. The fiscal impact, so this is something requested by council and something that we've also been looking at, is to understand what's the potential cost impact to commercial customers alongside the other planned rate increases that we already have, especially for 2023. So as you all know, those planned rate increases are in the commercial sector is for electric, water, sewer, and storm drainage, with an estimated bill impact increase of 7.5%. We've also mentioned a couple times the potential for a commercial waste management fee. We'll be starting to discuss that early in 2023 and probably be coming back to you to discuss that. I just wanted to flag that as a potential additional cost that commercial customers could be seeing. And then we really tried to understand what the potential cost impact would be by adding recycling and composting services. And what we found is this is just a really difficult thing to assess. There's a lot of variability within the private hauler pricing structure. So it varies based on how big of a bin you have, how frequent the collection is, how far your business is from hauling and processing facilities, but also there's just not a lot of price transparency. And so it's really hard for commercial customers to even do the shopping around to understand what their options are. And a lot of folks don't pay directly for that service. So if they're tenants in either, multifamily complex or a business complex, it's the landlord or the property owner that manage those contracts. And so folks don't necessarily have a choice within that. But we did our best to get data from businesses as well as from haulers and try to average that on a cost comparison per yard. So what it costs for a yard of trash for collection, a yard of recycling, a yard of organics. So if the base cost is trash, the average that we saw with regards to recycling is about 39% higher cost than trash service. And organics is about 151% higher cost than trash service. We put together a scenario to kind of give you a sense of what that might look like for somebody's actual bill. So if you had a commercial customer that had a 4-yard dumpster with 4 collections per month and are just doing trash, their base price might be somewhere around $124. If they were to add recycling service and divert 2 yards or 50% of their waste, they would reduce that trash bill half, and then the recycling bill would be a little bit higher than that, and their total would increase to about $148. And then if they were to add composting service on top of that, diverting an additional yard, so they'd be looking at 1 yard of trash, 2 yards of recycling, 1 yard of composting, again, 4 collections per month, they'd be looking at an increase to about $195 per month. I want to note that there are so many caveats and variables to this that it's really hard to pin that down, so don't say that this is set in stone. It's just to give you a sense of what that increase might be, and the general takeaway is that there is the possibility to reduce the trash bill in particular by diverting through recycling and composting and reducing your trash bin and reducing the frequency of trash pickup. Generally speaking, though, we can assume that there's going to be some additional cost per service. So that's just for consideration within this process. Some additional efforts before we get to the discussion piece that I just want to note that aren't captured within the Universal Recycling Ordinance, but that we do have work underway on is in municipal operations, we're rolling out recycling at a number of parks. We continue to work with our city facilities folks to identify additional zero waste opportunities, expanding zero waste events, and then aligning our purchasing and procurement processes and policies with zero waste practices. In construction and demolition, there's some components of that are being looked at through the Boulder County Code cohort process that we've talked to you all about. So I'll wait to see what comes out of that process and then see what additional we might need to look into there. In the residential services side, we'll be starting to look at rate analysis in 2023 and exploring these components that are listed here through that process. And then with the Green Star Schools program, we're adding additional funding toward that from the sustainability tax in 2023. So we'll be launching 4 schools in 2023 in partnership with EcoCycle and the school district. And that puts us on track to have all the Longmont schools participating in that program by the end of 2025. I want to note that I know there's been some issues with the composting at some of the schools, and we've been talking with EcoCycle and St. Vrain about how we can address that and then make sure of how we can help get those remaining schools into the program. So for discussion, as I mentioned, we have the 3 components that I'll really be getting feedback from you all on: the requirements, the exemptions, and the overall timeline. So I'll go back to each of those slides so that you can see those again. But generally, the timeline is recycling requirements in 2024, organics in 2025, and landscaping in 2029. And then looking at potential phasing if you all would like to bring bigger entities into those requirements in January or all the same in June. And then whether or not you all want to consider adding additional businesses or multifamily in organics. So before I go back to those other slides, are there any questions of clarification before we have that discussion?
Seeing none, I do have one though.
Yeah.
And it was from EcoCycle when Ryan was up. I think I misunderstood. Is EcoCycle actually a hauler?
They are a hauler for recycling and composting, not for trash.
Okay. So the other question is, in all of these fees, does that encompass the cost to take the compost to the compost facility?
That is a good question. That is what I can discern from the data that we have available, that yes, that would be the cost to take that composting to the existing facility. Yes. I don't know, Charlie, if you want to, okay, great.
And in that conversation, while we are deciding on this, are we still having the conversation about a composting facility at our old waste diversion plant site?
Does one of you want to speak to that?
I just want to know what these costs entail and
Yep.
what are we doing?
Mayor Peck and Council, Bob Allen, Director of Water and Waste Services. We are still talking to Boulder County about the option of called a green waste facility. The city could not do that on its own. It would have to be a regional facility. And right now, there's not any definitive movement in that direction, just the continued conversation.
Okay, as long as we keep talking. So- Okay, I think that's it for the questions on that. Counselor Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Peck. And Bob, maybe before you sit down,
Or just come
yeah,
sit
or-
over here.
it may not require Bob. Just hypothetically, if we had a regional center now, whatever that costs are, wherever it's located in the municipalities in Boulder County and Boulder County itself utilizing it, any idea how these costs would, how would these costs to commercial entities look different? And I realize you've got big generalizations and about variability. And when we get back into the discussion, I'll ask some other questions about, how we get more precise estimates of cost. But if there was a regional facility, what would we be seeing here in terms of implications for business categories or business sizes or,
Mayor and council, that I think would be a hard question to answer without knowing specifically what kind of facility was built, whether it was a transfer station that was still hauling material out of the county or whether it was a processing facility itself. But we pay the highest price right now for the compost green waste disposal, so we would expect that it would come down. And as a matter of fact, all these, even that slide that Lisa showed of what we would expect a bill to look like over time, that will come down with time as recycling markets become more mature, as organic disposal markets become more mature. We would expect all those costs would come down. So everything we're looking at is still kind of a point in time. But these markets need to be developed. They need to develop more, and over time, we would expect costs come down.
just one related question. Are we the only municipality, I'm guessing we're not, in Boulder County, kind of at this stage of discussion and consideration of a universal recycling ordinance and kind of a commitment to zero waste?
Boulder has an ordinance. Lisa, I don't know if in your research, you probably have a list of those regionally that do, and she could give that to you. But there are a number that are embracing the concept or have passed their ordinances or are, working toward that end like we are.
So if we, again, I guess this is hypothetical as well, and then I'll be done. But if we knew across, for all the L towns in Boulder and Superior, what the cost per, category or business size or type, that kind of the estimates that Lisa's baked into this, or concluded with her, what she's concluded, what those conclusions are. If we had an idea what those costs would be across the county to individual businesses, and then the totals compared to the cost of the development of not just a transit station, but one that processed, green waste, we'd get a pretty good idea of what the cost and returns would be for developing that center, as opposed to just looking at what our numbers are and hoping for the best. Does that make sense? If we had that, it might create a different conversation with county commissioners the next time, or among staff, to say, look, there ought to be some urgency, a greater urgency about this, because we could reduce costs to the public, to businesses, to commercial entities, and potential residents, if we got serious about the development of a regional solution. But we just don't have a way to do the cost-benefit estimate right now, do we?
It would be really challenging, because we'd have to assume we were going alone for the most part to do that. I think your question, and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but I think if we could...
It would be easy to misunderstand that question.
If we could collaborate on more regional solutions for this, we could pin those numbers down better. We could have better cost sharing. And by the way, that's the same thing for wastewater treatment, water treatment, and everything else we do. Regional solutions are going to be the way to bring costs down on all those fronts.
Yeah. If you roll up the cost to individual businesses in multifamily units, if you roll that up here and then roll that up in every community, you get an idea of what the real cost is compared to the cost of doing something on a regional basis. That's, I guess, my point.
Yeah.
And we have no basis for doing that right now. So we're kind of skating this, all by ourselves.
So Bob, I think one of the issues, one of the unknowns is how the commercials play in this, because the commercials have the other communities and some of them have their own processing facilities. So whether or not they would divert into that could impact it, because their business model is going to impact that equation too. I would assume.
Yes, yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem, oh, I'm sorry, are you? I didn't see Councilor Waters' light on anymore, so I assumed he was finished. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So generally speaking, this question is going to be concerning timelines. The timelines that were presented and the phasing of the timelines generally tracks for me. What I believe I remember from previous conversations about residential composting as the most amount of green waste or matter that's produced residentially is generally yard waste. So why is landscaping so far out in 2029 as far as a timeline? What's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, I'll answer and then hand over to you, Bob. So this conversation is focused on the commercial sector, and what the data is showing from the commercial sector is food waste is the bigger impact. There's also some difficulty with regards to understanding where all landscapers take their waste. So it's not an entity that would subscribe for commercial composting service. They generally haul their own waste to wherever it goes, and they pay higher fees from my understanding. So that would be, it's a little bit longer out because we'd be looking at that regional infrastructure piece to help bring those costs down. On the residential side, do you want to speak to that side in particular with residential yard waste?
Well, my question was about commercial landscaping. It has nothing to do, I just remembered that from a previous conversation that the vast majority of residential composting is yard waste.
Yard waste, yeah.
And so it just didn't track for me, I guess, that, commercial landscaping would be so far out there into 2029. It sounds like it's because of unknowns more than anything.
And really the lack of a regional facility.
And lack of regional.
So you've got, if you think of like a multifamily complex, most of their green waste is yard waste, not food waste.
Yep.
And same with any commercial entity. So there is really no solution for that right now. Charlie and I were kind of going over the numbers the other day, and the disposal practices are all over the place. And they're not, some are cheaper than others, most definitely. Some just hold that material in their yards for years until they can do something else with it. But there's no good solution, and until there is, we can't, it'd be hard to make that requirement and say, right now, most of it goes to the landfill, we assume. So that you could make the requirement, but there's no solution right now.
It just seemed anecdotally, I guess, it seemed to me that it would be easier for a landscaping company to segregate that material versus, a restaurant having to, filter out non-compostable material from their food waste and things like that. So that just, it seemed to me to be a low-hanging fruit comparatively, but I understand the justification. So thank you. That was my question.
And most of the green waste out there is yard waste, even though we can target some commercial entities that produce a lot of food waste. If you take the whole city of Longmont, most of that's still going to be yard waste across the community.
Councilor Martin.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Peck. With regard to regional solutions, I am thinking there are really two sides to that. One is a regional processing center for the stage one waste, garbage, yard waste, stuff like that. And then the stuff becomes compost at a regional processing center. And where does it go from there? So the question also needs to be addressed, is it be able to be used regionally, or are we shipping it somewhere else to be used in agriculture hundreds of miles away?
Mayor, Peck, and Council, it could be used in a multitude of ways. But if you recall a few years back, one of the greatest hazards that was identified for this Front Range region is the loss of soil locally. So one one use could be to bind it to a lot of these soils on these natural lands open space lands we're trying to preserve. We have one company that we work with for our wastewater treatment biosolids, who would like to take it and use it for mine reclamation. So I've heard just about every option. Some require it to be trucked, yes, but if the use was really high and the benefit was high, that could be worthwhile. In other cases, it could be used here locally or regionally pretty easily.
Okay. And for different uses require different qualities of the end products?
It could, yes, and how it's screened. Your questions, and I should say, are getting beyond my level of expertise too. So even when I talk about its use on soils as a soil amendment or preservative, I'm not an expert in that field, so others would have to answer those questions. But presumably, yes, the quality would matter.
So when we get there, those questions will be part of the conversation.
And we have experts. In particular, we're lucky to have A1 Organics, and Bob Yost is, I think I would probably say Colorado's expert on composting from the raw material to its final disposition. So we're in good hands there, and yes, that would be expertise we would need help with.
All right, thank you.
Counselor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Bob, I was just going to ask you, you kind of touched on some stuff here, and to tie into what Councilmember Waters was, kind of driving at, in the sense of, and maybe this a little bit after a couple of other comments have been made, but, do we think that maybe in a year we'll have better data about how some of this regional, solutions to the composting issue will kind of figure itself out, and we'll be able to figure out whether we have the markets to kind of pursue a regional center like is being, talked around?
Good question. As with anything like this, politics weigh in considerably. And I think that if we want to pursue those regional solutions, we're going to have to probably work on them a little bit higher up than we are right now, meaning that we're going to have to probably have policy interaction with the county about their priorities. We've heard different messaging from them, and I can't speak for them, and I wouldn't, but they have looked at, whether or not maybe smaller transfer stations would be better than that large facility they had proposed at Rainbow Nurseries. They're a little gun shy, as we should be too, that anytime you try to do a facility like that, you're going to have nearby residents or businesses that are going to possibly object. So all those hurdles are still ahead of us, and I think that's why we're bogged down right now.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Mayor Peck, could I just make a quick clarification? Because these are all very good questions as we're working towards what those regional solutions may look like.
Okay.
The proposals that you see here, though, did not count on any regional solution. These are based
Correct.
on what's out there in the commercial field today. So I just wanted to make sure folks understood. That's also why it's difficult to determine the cost, because we aren't controlling them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So thank you. And one of the directions that I want from council is, do we accept the timeline or agree basically to the timeline that staff has put out from 2023 to 2029? And are there any, yes. And I think our comments should be to that timeline at this point. Is there anything that we want to change, move up, going too slow on perhaps, that we think could be done faster?
I'm okay with the timeline.
Okay. Counselor Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I was holding those timeline questions because I thought I heard Lisa say that we were going to go back to earlier slides for those discussions. So is that where we are in this discussion?
Yep.
There you are. Oh,
Yes.
that is the earlier slide.
Right.
I was just looking at the picture. Just didn't change.
Yes, that's my little photo model there on his little recycling truck to represent.
Okay, that was the slide. Yeah.
There we go. So here's the timeline. So yeah, we can jump into, again, the requirements, the exemptions, and the timeline. So I'll pull each slide back up and we can walk through each of those.
Okay, so I think they belong on this slide. First, the question about this period when the ordinance goes into effect, but then enforcement begins a year later. What does in effect without enforcement really mean? Does that mean that we're going to be monitoring and giving warnings or something? And if so, what's the cost differential when with non-enforcement and enforcement?
Yeah, so we have the ability to, and we have been talking with our code enforcement folks to start that monitoring piece as soon as those things go into effect. But you're right, the focus for that first year would really be with the warnings, with the education, with connecting people to resources, and it wouldn't be until that June 2025 period that we would begin with fines. So it wouldn't be a free-for-all in that period. We would be working with our code enforcement folks to be out there saying, yes, these folks have their recycling services up. And like I said, we've already chatted with them about their ability to step in for that. But as I mentioned earlier, we really, from what we heard in the stakeholder engagement process, people just need some time, and we want to be able to have the right resources and support available for people to comply. You all can bump that enforcement piece up if you like. It's just reflective of that feedback, and also to give staff the time to accommodate those exemptions, the financial assistance applications, and those sorts of things as well.
Okay, my second question is, we do have code, so if I were building a house, for example, there would need to be some kind of a place for me to keep my waste diversion bins out of sight from the street when I wasn't using them. And the logistics problem of having multiple waste diversion streams and places for, the commercial repositories to exist, that's going to be an issue, right? Are we going to adopt new codes so that at least for street reworks, alley reworks, and new construction, that we accommodate those new requirements? And what do we do about places where none of those things happen and we don't have a nice opportunity to make this easier?
Yeah, Mayor Peck and council members, I think that that's a great question. We do have an existing code for new construction already that is an equal space requirement. So all new construction is required to provide equal space for trash recycling and composting bins currently. So new construction has that requirement. That would be something that we would need to look to build into the code amendments for the requirements for existing buildings. And again, pointing to one of those exceptions, there might be circumstances in which people there are some premises that just can't not accommodate additional bins. And so we would work with folks to either try to figure out a solution or provide them with an exemption. But that is something that we would need to look at. How do we then accommodate those additional bins in those existing spaces?
All right, good, thank you.
Okay, so going to the requirements piece in recycling, are folks, does council want to maintain these proposed requirements, or does anyone want to make any amendments to the requirements that are existing here? Are there any questions on that piece?
I don't see any questions from, any other questions from council or comments. I do agree with this timeline, and I understand what Councilor Martin was saying about not fining until 2025, that it looks like it's going to cost the city quite a bit to go through all of these processes without, but you can't find somebody for what they don't know. I mean, we'd get in more trouble for that than we would. So I agree with this timeline. And as things progress, I'm sure you'll come back to us and say, this timeline may be moved up, or we're going to have to postpone it with reasons for that. So as a first look, I think it looks good.
Mayor Peck and council members, just one question. Do you all want to keep the sort of phased-in timeline? So in the January of 2024, bigger premises would be required to recycle, and then in June, all other premises? Or do you want to skip the phasing and just have everybody required in June? And then there's a similar approach to the organics.
Let's see, who is six again? Oh, Councilor, Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So what are the number of properties or complexes that are 75-plus dwelling units? Like, what's the percentage, if you will, of what you're hitting there in January versus June, which is obviously only 6 months later, so.
Yeah, Mayor Peck and Councilmember Rodriguez, that is a great question that I have been trying to also find the answer
Okay.
to. That has not been easy data for us to understand.
And similar also with the 10,000-plus square foot litmus test for businesses. It's also a number that's kind of ethereal at this point.
Yeah, we have building size, but it's hard for us to track individual business size.
So therefore, okay. It just makes me wonder then how effective it is to actually make a delineation instead of just saying everybody, all commercial properties. If we don't even really know what that number truly is. So I guess that's my question about making that delineation. Otherwise, I really don't have a big problem with a 6-month span there, so.
To kind of touch on what you were talking about, I was thinking of some of the numbers that, of units in the housing authority property. And some of them would be in that 75-plus category. And some of those sites would be difficult and take time to figure out how you would be able to position everything in those locations. So just looking at it with that lens, I think having some flexibility on timing, because you may have to make some, structural adjustments to the property in order to do it, but
Sure, but
I can't remember the numbers on the top of my head of where that would be.
the delayed enforcement alone will give you that kind of leeway.
Potentially.
So to that point, do we need a code change on new developments that they must have composting as well as recycling and trash bins? I mean, we have a lot of things in the hopper here that will be developed, and if we're going to enforce this, we don't want them coming back and say we have no place to put that.
Yeah, Mayor Peck and council members, so there is already code requirements for all new construction to require that space. It's just the existing buildings that could potentially be an issue.
Great, thanks. Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. My point was that I was thinking a little bit about how long do you want to sustain the pain? Start off with your part in June, and then add on the pain in January. Do we want to just do it all at once and then have a year to figure it out, and then to start another year to start on the enforcement part? I'm not certain that there's any advantage of waiting the 6 months unless there was some part around having enough staff to help answer questions.
Mayor Peck and Councilmember McCoy, that is another component in terms of costs that would be incurred to the city to staff up in order to manage the implementation of this process. If you could clarify your comment for me, it'd be helpful. So we could require all businesses in January of 2024 or all businesses in June. Can you just clarify for me if you were saying, should we phase in those larger businesses first or just go with all properties at once in the June timeframe?
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Yes, I was just saying all at once.
All at
I
once.
just thought, you've got a year to roll it out and answer questions and we're not getting to the point where we're, enforcing it with fines and stuff for even for another year for that. So we're really looking at 2 years. Why not just get it all out there so that it stops being this bone of contention sort of issue that just keeps rolling out, and people getting, one group getting angry and then another group getting angry. It just doesn't seem very logical.
Sure. Thank you for that.
That was a good point. There's a lot of timelines in here.
It's a lot of pieces to put together, yes. So just bringing up the organics, I just want to confirm if there's any additional modifications as far as either the requirements, again, the exemptions would be the same, or the timeline that we're looking at with regards to organics. And if I'm hearing you all correctly, it sounds like you all are leaning towards just all businesses at the same time in the June timeframe? Or?
You weren't hearing that from me.
Okay.
This makes sense.
Okay.
I think, looking at this again, 2025 is kind of out there for the food wholesalers, distributors, manufacturers. They generally have space. For me, what sounds like it might be the problem is the haulers that are not the city of Longmont. Will they actually pick up compost? Do they do that? And that's going to have to be the owners of the properties or the businesses to research and figure out.
Yeah, Mayor Peck and council members, most but not all of the haulers do provide composting service. We do have that as part of their licensing requirements. I think there was just one that we saw that didn't provide composting service. And we have engaged the haulers during this process, and all of them said they are ready to pick up these requirements as they come forward.
So knowing that, why don't we do it in 2024 rather than 2025?
So that would be requiring both recycling and composting in 2024, both at the same time.
Okay, Susie Hidalgo-Farang?
Thank you, Mayor. So are you looking to stagger the organics and the recycling? So that was the purpose of that. As far as the January and then June rollout, was the purpose of that for capacity as far as staff goes, or?
It was mostly to give council some options where you could move quicker on some of the bigger waste generators. So if you all wanted to move this process faster, that we would propose doing the folks that we know are the bigger waste generators first, so we can get the process going and then bring everyone else in later, more so than staffing capacity.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Yarbrough?
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I think that if we start off with the businesses, and I have no problem with if we had them all start at the same time, but I feel like if we stagger, we know where we go wrong, right? And we know what we need to fix. So we have 6 months to get something right. Education within our community can be very challenging at times, so making sure that these businesses have everything that they need within those 6 months. And hopefully it gives us 6 months to get, correct some issues. We know that when we start any program, any pilot program, it takes a while and there's some issues and we have to go back and reevaluate and reassess situations. So for me, I think that at first I was leaning more towards all at one time, but then I was thinking about any program that you start off, especially with, we're talking a city, of all commercial businesses. I think we need to give them that time to see what works within 6 months and what doesn't work, and how we can reevaluate and reassess the situation and get some things right. Check and see if those haulers will be there to do what they need to do, and if there's some challenges with that within those 6 months. So that's where I stand on that.
Yeah, Mayor Peck and Councilmember Yarbrough, thank you. I think that's a great point.
Sorry, Counselor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I'd like to move that we accept the proposed timeline.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Counselor Martin, seconded by Counselor Hidalgo Faring that we accept the proposed timeline. Do we need any more discussion on this? I don't think so. Let's vote. Whoops, I have to go back to the screen. So that carries unanimously.
Great, thank you all. I have one additional question, just to call your attention to that last bullet item. Whether or not council would like to include all other businesses or multifamily properties in the organics requirements. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the data analysis was just looking at the food permitted businesses. We talked about the yard waste. From what we've seen from a lot of the research, there's definitely smaller benefit compared to the cost, and there's a lot of issues with contamination. We could always bring in this piece at a later date if you all want, but I did want to give you all the opportunity to direct us whether or not you want us to include that at this time.
Counselor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I have a question about that. Are not homeowners associations a big contributor or a big generator of yard waste? And do we have the authority to require anything of them in terms of how they do their yard waste?
I think the question is, most homeowners associations contract with landscaping firms to provide that service, so that would really go into the conversation that Bob had about what do you do with landscaping companies in terms of that capacity. I'm not aware of any that really do that on their own. So I think it would fall within the landscaping company section.
Counselor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Harold, how many of our LHA properties, where they fall in terms of numbers of units and the phasing in of this program with LHA properties? And what are the implications for LHA and our costs as they're phased in?
So, again, thinking rough numbers on this one, I would say Spring Creek, Fall River, the Suites, Village Place. Let me tell you what wouldn't fall in that number. And it's interesting, I think, Zinnia, oddly enough, that we're building adjacent to the Suites. Zinnia wouldn't be in the 75 unit, the Suites would. Briarwood, Aspen Meadows neighborhood
So
wouldn't fall in the first.
So Suites, and as we're going down this,
Yeah.
would be in first phase of
Would be in the first
implementation.
phase, correct.
Zinnia would come in ultimately, along with other.
And that was easier because that would be built.
So what's the follow-on, what should we anticipate in terms of costs to the Housing Authority?
So we would have to, so two things. One, we would have to absorb the increased cost in the service.
I know.
Not on
question
the
is, what will those
organics,
be?
but on the recycling.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we would be interested in. I think probably the most challenging issue is going to be with the structural adjustments that we need to make on some of those properties. Because we will have to work with the investors on those properties to make sure that we have the funds available to do it, because it's not technically out of the replacement reserve. And so we would have to look at the fund balance and work with the investors in that to get permission to do it. Obviously, they would, but that starts impacting the development revenues as you're moving through it.
At what point would you have that analysis? Because it's going to be important for us to know, and it'll be a good
I think by
lesson
the time they bring it back, I think it's a different perspective to bring in, because, we're going to be working with operational and capital components on this, and we'll have to split them out appropriately. The interesting one that comes into play is actually the lodge in Hearthstone, because that's a HUD 202
Yeah.
property, and so we could say, here's the increase that we need, and HUD could say, and they did it to us in this budget cycle, we said we needed a 9% increase to handle the cost increases, and they go, we'll give you 7.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we will model all of that and be able to have those as examples.
It gives us a real kind of practical, hands-on, along with other
Correct.
landlords or property owners
Right.
of commercial properties across the city. At what point would we have more, just in this kind of the same vein, more examples, not just estimates, but real costs for, pick a category of chamber members, a category, or a sample of chamber members, a sample of LDDA members, a sample of larger employers, in terms of the commercial business side of this, along with residences, to say, we've sampled it this way, here are some actual costs, so that when we're making those decisions, we're not making them with, pretty gross estimates. And I don't mean that as a criticism. When we get into actually looking at the ordinance, will we have that by that time? Those data by that time?
Mayor Peck and Councilmember Waters, I'll take this one. So we have within our plan in 2023 to bring back some general rate analysis, and I think that this falls into that analysis, kind of doing some profiles and, potential impacts to types of businesses. And it's a little bit, to council's discretion about, we can come sooner with a URO that maybe doesn't have that. It might be early in the second quarter of the year before we would be able to have all of the analysis to back that up, but that's also part of.
That'll be real helpful when we get there.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I think the point on this is we needed some direction from you all to say, here's the temperature that you have and here's what you're looking at, so then we could refine it versus, I think the possibilities were endless depending on what we brought to you. So I think this lets us structure it so that we can bring you back those specific examples.
So on your question about should you include all multifamily in this, when you roll it out, would it be possible to include all of them with the ones that say they can't do it coming back to the city with exemptions, almost letting them collect the data for you and saying we can't do this based upon this data of what we have? Because my fear might be, and I'm being cynical, is that large family units that have 200 or 300 people in them as we go forward will not want to do it and would come back and not do it if we don't make it mandatory. Is that being too cynical?
I think if council wants to wait, when we bring back to you the modeling that you requested on the housing authority properties, I think you may have more information to make that decision at that point, because we're really what we're gonna bring back to you is really the LIHTC affordable properties, which the margins those are the smallest margins you're typically gonna find. And that will at least give you some data and comparison properties to look at, because we have different sizes, we have different land constraints on different properties, and that may help you all assess the question on the multifamily properties.
Okay. So do we want to make a motion to, do we need a motion on this one? Or do we just need to give you direction? Tell me once again what you need this direction on. We've been talking about so much.
Mayor Peck and council members, I think we have what we need for tonight.
Okay.
So unless you have other questions or comments that you want us to consider, we will work to put together the draft URO, work with our legal folks, work on the rate analysis piece, and aim to have something back to you in the early second quarter of next year.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And then we'll bring the example on the multifamily so you all can
Okay.
tackle that conversation then.
Yeah. Great. Thank you so much for your work. It's
Thank
a
you all
lot.
for your conversation. Have a good night.
You too. So now we are on our water efficient master plan update. Does council need to have a bio break? Does staff need a? Let's take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
I bumped this off of something, but I can't figure out what it is.
Well, you can
I'm
sit,
gonna run back here because I can't get my
you can sit at the table, they're free to go. And the microphone's right there.
Hi, Zandy.
Are you breaking it, Lisa?
Yeah.
I think you can tilt forward, doesn't it? And can you email your presentation to the city clerk staff, because we archived it? Thank you.
I got that. That's fine. Yep. We get that. Financial impact. Yes.
Lots of questions. work though, didn't it? Welcome back. We're going to have the Water Efficient Master Plan update with Ken Houston.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for your time tonight on your agenda. We'd like to present just a short update on our water efficiency master plan and where we're going with it. Before I start, I'd like to introduce Hope Bartlett. She's our new water conservation specialist with the city, and just been here just a little bit less than a year and just done an outstanding job. So I'd like to credit her for a lot of the work we have, you'll see before us tonight. But in short, the purpose of our study session item tonight is to bring forward the start of a update process for our water efficiency master plan. We really won't be asking for any decisions tonight or asking for any direction, but what we really will be asking for is any thoughts that council has about moving forward with this update. One of the things I've experienced over the years working with the water conservation programs is that there are a lot of citizens in Longmont that really are interested in water conservation, and we do get a lot of feedback, and so some of the things we'll be presenting tonight are a result of years of listening to the citizens. So just briefly, what we're here tonight is to provide council an opportunity to step into the start of our water efficiency master plan update. We have a requirement, there's a state law that requires all water providers who have deliver over 2,000 acre feet to a customer to have an approved state water conservation master plan, and it has to be updated every 7 years. Our prior update was 2017, and so we'll be, in a year or two, we'll be needing to submit an updated report. As a result, we always start a little earlier than it's needed, because one of the things in a conservation master plan update is that we really want to get a lot of public input. And so this will give us sufficient time to do that. That being said, we do have a very good, robust water efficiency master plan that we've been working on and following for really 2 cycles, or about 14 years now, of state-approved master plans. A lot of the elements of those plans are what you would expect in a plan. We have the city acting as the role model for the city. We've done a number of things in our parks and our public facilities to further water conservation. Also, registering water use. When I think back years ago, we didn't even have universal metering, and our first efforts were, well, we need to have universal metering so everybody's metered. And we had people say, what, you're going to meter us and you're going to charge me for what I use? We say, yeah, that's what you do anywhere else in society. So that, believe it or not, it was really about 2005 before we were completely universally metered in the city, and we were one of the earlier ones. There's still some entities that don't have everybody metered yet. It is now a state law that you do have to have everybody metered, but so that's part of it. We've adjusted our water rates to have conservation rates in it. Xeric and WaterWise landscaping. We have water waste regulations that we've had for a number of years that really helped us out in 2002 when we had that big drought. We continue to have leak detection, and really importantly, very useful for Longmont, we have a very robust reuse of both non-potable and of our effluent from our wastewater treatment plant. We actually do it a little different than other entities. We utilize it to meet return flow obligations and other exchange agreements, and so we actually many times utilize fully 100% of the water that we have that is fully consumable water that's allowed for reuse. So then we also work closely with commercial and residential entities. Wanted to highlight real quickly what we've accomplished, and we really, to keep a program going for a city this size with a very small staff. We utilize two major water efficiency company efforts. One is Efficiency Works. That's actually run through the Platte River Power Authority. And they, generally they do kind of more of our commercial and industrial water efficiency and conservation efforts. And then Resource Central, which does a lot of our residential programs. Those two entities, by being able to contract directly with them, we get a lot of work done and very beneficial. Efficiency Works, I always like to point out because we're able to work with our electrical department. They had really started electrical conservation programs with industrial and commercial accounts, and so by joining that, we're actually coming to the customer only once with both conservation efforts. We also have a pretty robust public outreach effort. Internally, we've converted a number of our parks to raw water irrigation, and as we're building new ones, in fact, the newest park we're kind of building right now is going to be the Nino Gallo Park down by the Sisters property on south end of Longmont, and that's going to have a raw water irrigation system. So that really helps our conservation. And you've heard a lot about it, but we also have the AMR program, meter program is coming forward, and that will really help us in a number of our efforts. Where we are right now, or with our water conservation efforts, really stems from an effort the Water Board and Council looked at and set up a water efficiency goal a number of years ago as part of our 2004 Raw Water Master Plan and our 2008 water demand evaluation. We set up as a community a goal of a 10% reduction in raw water demand, at time of build out of the city, or a time of when we have a full development. We actually, to put that in perspective, without that plan, utilizing our 2002, when the City Council set that goal, we would have had a build-out demand of about 35,000 acre-feet. So our goal then was to save 3,500 acre-feet of water by the time we build out the city, and then that becomes a build-out demand of 31,500 acre-feet. That is the number we have used for quite some time now as we look at developing our water supply, including what we used when we participated in the Windy Gap Firming project. We are, I guess, very delighted to tell you we've essentially met that goal at this point. And so that's a testament both to the efforts of the city staff that are working on this, but also our community. We're delighted how well our community has accepted that goal. So at this point, what we wanted to do is just, as we start into this plan, we wanted to lay out on the table some of the projects or some of the areas that we would like to do further study on in the update. And then at the end, we'll ask council give you an opportunity to give us any additional, either, yeah, we like that idea, no, we don't, or any additional ideas you would like us to go forward with. So really, to put this into context, timing was pretty good with the Climate Action Task Force. They did, one of their outcomes of that effort was they recommended the city achieve a significant additional overall water savings, in addition above the 10%. Council and Water Board discussed that as that came out, and really agreed that we should look at and evaluate more aggressive water conservation goals. Now, all the projects and all the programs we'll be talking about as I go forward here are things that we'll be studying. So we don't have an answer, we don't have a number, we don't know what it is, but we wanted to let you know we're going to study this because we believe it's what we're hearing from the community. So Currently, we still have the 10% reduction goal. And as we said, we believe we've essentially met that, and we believe it makes sense at this time to look at possibly increasing that. We don't have a number to increase it to, but we believe we can study that and look at that and look at, what it would take to achieve different goals. To start the conversation, we would say we probably want to go from a 10% to maybe a 15 to 20% goal and look at what it would take to accomplish some of those. So as part of the study, if council's okay, we'll go ahead and look at that as possibly increasing that goal. We also have a number of programs to help benefit the vulnerable communities in Longmont. A number of our programs are either free or heavily discounted programs, such as indoor and outdoor water efficient fixtures, garden in a box, slow the flow irrigation evaluations. That helps people reduce their water bills by reducing their water use. WaterWise yard seminars through Resource Central, we're able to get a lot of information, a lot of seminars out there to help people. And more recently, with council's direction, we started some lawn replacement, some turf removal projects that is one of the really good ones, really good programs that we think will really help on water conservation and also help with the vulnerable communities. We're really looking also, we'll be looking at updating the city landscape codes, arterial right-of-ways. Probably the one area that I get more comments from over time is arterial landscaping, whether it be, darn it, you're sprinkling on the sidewalk or the street, or why do we have grass in the middle, in that area. So that is one of the areas that we want to look at hard and do a robust effort at coming up with new arterial guidelines and trying to solve really what, for me, is what the community is telling me. And finally, we're looking hard at updating both our parks and public space standards to make sure that we're following the best practices in that area. We also are very concerned, with our watershed, so we're trying to increase education outreach for not only lowering water use, but also impacts on our watershed. And then Longmont, we also want to look at our own internal practices to make sure we're keeping our watershed clean and healthy. One other area that is really a primary area of interest at the state level, it's really being talked about, and we've started programs to get us there, is what's called a Growing Water Smart program. And that is really an effort to look hard at how we develop in the future, so that as we grow bigger, as we kind of fill in and finish out the city, that we're doing that from a water standpoint. And one of the ways you do that is you get in a little bit earlier in the development process to make sure that as the developer's looking at a project, they're thinking the best way they can about water efficiency. But also, we want to give them additional options and landscaping standards and those kind of things. That is a fairly involved process as I'm sure you're all aware, having dealt with that arena in other areas. And so we've actually been taking, different city staff members to seminar twice now to seminars to help look at that and really guide us to that. One area that I would point out that is really kind of, I'm sure you've all heard about the issues with the Colorado River and the lower basin. They need to they need to get a handle on their water. But the upper basin has also said, we'll try our best water conservation efforts. And one of the things that is almost really becoming an area that most, especially all the larger water providers have already agreed, is to try to set a goal of a 30% reduction of non-essential turf areas. And so that's part of growing water smart, and that's part of, some of the things, we don't have a standard, we don't have anything, but we want to look at that, and we want to develop that in a more robust way. So there's 4 real specific programs that we want to look at. That's the turf replacement program. While we've initiated it, we really want to think it through and make sure we do it right. We want to look at our codes and design standards to update everything to more modern standards for water conservation. We want to greatly expand our outreach opportunities to the community, and that's really going to be a large part of this current master plan update is reaching out to the community and having a robust outreach, and then learning how to reach out and educate, have our educational components better in the future, and then also looking at watering guidelines and schedules. So the Water Efficiency Master Plan update will take about 1.5 years to get through our part, get the studies done, get the evaluations, get the public input. We're hoping to launch it early next year, get done about the summer of '24. We'll be coming back to council a number of times. We'll be coming back as we're in the process, as we look at different programs, getting input on some of those programs, and then finally at the end to have you look at the final plan. Once we've adopted the plan, hopefully around the summer of '24, fall of '24, then we have to submit it to the state of Colorado, who also reviews it, compares it to their standards to make, and we do know what those are, so we're pretty sure we'll meet it, and we've been very successful having our plans approved. But then hopefully it's approved by the state of Colorado by January of '25. Kind of the hook that the state has in that review process is that they can hold up, the state law that set up this requirement, they can hold up state monies flowing to entities that don't have approved plans. We have one, we will, but we want to make sure we have sufficient time to get that and go forward with it. So I thank you for your time tonight. We'd be happy to answer any questions. We'd also, if there are any additional water conservation elements you'd like us to study, we'd be happy to take any input and include it in our study efforts.
Thank you, Ken. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I think generally speaking, by and large, it hits the points, especially when you're talking about landscaping, the amount of water that we put on those green areas. So I was informed, and I could have gotten faulty information by a staff member, that years, if not decades ago, there are agreements put in place with certain HOA subdivisions where if they had green space areas or green areas that were abutting arterials or things like that, that they were not metered and that the city actually absorbed those costs. Is that accurate?
Mayor Peck and Councilmember Rodriguez, essentially, what happens is on some of the commercial, my understanding, some of the commercial parcels, it's not that the water is not metered, it's that portion of the right-of-way that is public, we don't charge them for that water because they're actually watering public lands. We do meter everything and
But they're not charged for it, but they're also in charge of the watering, so therefore they could be doing it very haphazardly, if you will.
That is correct, and that is one of the things we are going to be looking at really hard
Okay.
as part of that arterial landscaping standards.
Well, this is the first time that something where it was germane to the topic, where this has allowed me to ask that question, because it was a little bit disturbing. Like, we're in the middle of a 100-degree day, and they're watering in the middle of the afternoon. And finding out that the city's essentially paying for it, it was, like, as I said, a little disturbing. But we had an amazingly astute, if not gifted, candidate for one of our boards talk to us this Saturday about the concept of how many people can you fit on a lawn, if you will, water-wise, because the question was about density and how does density affect water, conservation and things like along those lines. And so I think specifically looking at that, because we have some very large subdivisions, a couple in the southwest part of town that come to mind with vast swaths of just greenways and things like that that require a lot of water to maintain their appearance. I live just down the road on South Sherman from the utility building, right, that building, and I remember that it seemed that they were doing, I don't know, an experiment, if you will, where they were replacing the turf with a more natural grass, if you will. How did that work? Have you seen the savings? Is that something that will translate to, say, our parks, to even maybe the rough areas of our golf courses, for instance, where it doesn't have to be as manicured? Just curious how that's gone, because I've never heard or seen anything from it outside of the fact that I drove by it every day. So,
Yes, Councilmember Peck and Councilmember Rodriguez. You are correct. We did do that, as you're aware, on the south side of the service center. There's a fairly large lawn area that was, in the past, was bluegrass, and it was converted to a crested wheatgrass. And we've been monitoring that. We have about a 50% water savings, so it's pretty significant. And we actually, I like it when people say, well, I thought I heard about that, but I don't know about that, because that tells me, well, it was pretty successful if people don't realize we made that transition. We transitioned that to a much lower water use grass very successfully. I credit our Parks Department, because we didn't do it. Our Parks Department helped us do that, and they did an absolute excellent job in getting it converted over. But yeah, now it's saving that much water. It is very germane in that that's a good way to save water on areas. It wouldn't work, I'll say, it's not a turf that is very resilient, so you couldn't use it on a sports field. But we believe those kinds of activities, which is really where we want to look at, and it kind of goes to what we're saying, about 30%, something around there, we'd like to see converted from the higher water use to either low or no water use, either xeriscape or low turf use like that. That you can do that on a lot of areas if they're, what we call, they're not areas that take a lot of traffic. And so, yeah, that's been very successful, and we're happy. There's a couple other places in town. I won't even say where. I'll see if people can figure out where they are. But that turf conversion is one of the projects we want to look very hard at. And the state legislature just passed a law last session providing funding for that. So we believe we'll see even more as we go forward, because we'll be able to get additional funding in addition to the funding we have.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I bet you know what I'm going to say. So first question is everybody thinks they know what you mean when you say efficiency, but in fact, it's a ratio, and it could be a ratio of any number of things. What definition of water efficiency are we using?
Yeah, well, essentially, when we're talking about water efficiency, we're talking about more efficiently using the water that we have, as opposed to water conservation, where we're saying we're trying to conserve or not use water. I agree, they're used interchangeably all the time.
Yeah,
and I even do that, I apologize.
But efficiency is of the water we take out of our raw channels, water rights, how much we use to exhaustion, or how much is lost and not used by us. That's what I mean. What's the definition?
Yeah, really what we're looking for when we're looking at the efficiency is, for the water that we have and when we use it, that we use it more efficiently at its point of application.
So it's not going down the gutter.
Yeah, so it's not going down the gutter, and it's much more efficient to have xeriscape than it is to have Kentucky bluegrass.
Sure.
As opposed to water conservation, where we might put in a low flow fixture, so we actually don't even use water.
Yeah, got that. And it's doing pretty well because we've got more people, but we're not delivering more acre feet. We're delivering fewer acre feet. So, then that's all good. So a thing that I keep wondering about is that elsewhere in our city planning policies and in our land use codes, we are providing for more density in our land use in any number of ways, focusing on infill, having narrower lots for single-family homes, looking at zoning changes, but we keep using the same number for how big the city is going to be when it's full. And I keep thinking that we should be looking at a range of numbers, that we might end up being all done when we're only at 120,000 people. On the other hand, if we get real tight, we might be at 140 or 50,000 people, and yeah, then we're probably done. But even if we continue to be more efficient in the way that individuals use water or habitable areas use water, we still need to look at how much water those higher populations are going to require in terms of total acre feet. Because even if we keep using less per person, if our people grow faster, then we could reverse that trend. So what I would like to say is it in the water use master plan that these possible variations gets considered, or is it somewhere else?
Mayor Peck and Councilmember Martin, I would, I guess, hold out that we would probably want to look at that through our future water demand evaluation process. That's really where we look really hard at what does our future demand look like based upon our comprehensive plan. That's how we develop that, and then if we want to look at changes, if the comprehensive plan ever changed, then we would update our future water demand evaluation. But if we wanted to say, well, which I really like the thought, that you say, well, what is the impact on our water supply if we change this comp plan this way or that way? We can certainly look at that as well, and to know that,
So let me jump in.
So, because my question is, so if it's not now, if it's not this plan, when does the right plan come around? Because I don't want to overlook that.
Yeah, so if you remember when we were looking at our water rates and Becky was getting the numbers into per capita usage and what we were seeing, so she's gonna take, this is where it comes into the plan that they're doing when we look at the per capita usage and the amount of, the per capita usage and the work that Becky's doing, you attach it to the work that they're doing, and then that then informs the planning documents that we're looking at it. So it'll be in both places as we're looking at it, but it'll be in the planning documents.
Which planning documents?
Planning department documents.
Which don't come before us.
So this water plan informs this plan in terms of how we look at growth and what that looks at, and then you're gonna base it on the per capita usage too. In addition, there's other variables that come into play in terms of if you look at more dense development, then you need more open space to accommodate for that. And so there are a number of different variables that they're gonna have to be managing in this conversation. Does that make sense?
No,
It's okay.
I absolutely did not find an answer in
Okay.
that. Sorry.
So, go ahead.
Let me muddle it a little more for you. As Harold said, there are a lot of variables here. When we lost Longmont Foods, that was really the inflection point in the decline in our water use. And that combined with the efficiencies in fixtures, so the winter use has gone down. In the years I've been at Longmont, the winter use has gone down from about 8.5 to 9 MGD, or million gallons per day, to about 7.5. But as you grow as a community, your water planning always has to be for the peak day. And that is driven by factors other than conservation. So the more space, the more people, you're going to have more fire flows, more fire sprinkler systems. You're going to have things that will push that water demand higher on the peak day, and that's what you have to plan for. Industry, too, is really light in Longmont for water use, so we are carving out the possibility that industry could actually start consuming more water again. It's extremely low in Longmont. So those things really drive our water planning at that high level. But the efficiencies and the uses are at the same time going down, but they get dwarfed by that peak day need. And that's what drives our planning more than anything.
I still have the question, we know that we are not really worried about our water if we have 120,000 people, even though the public doesn't really believe that. They're convinced that we're gonna run out. I agree, I was not considering decisions that we might make about adding commercial uses for water to the mix in the city, but that's something we can control, right? We get to control whether we say this business that's gonna use, this many thousand gallons a day, can come in or not, right? No?
Not necessarily. So if there was something where they had use by right, then it's a different conversation.
Okay. Still, it seems to me that the question that I'm trying to ask is not completely unreasonable, which is if we have 150,000 people, do we still have enough water? And where do we direct staff to look at that?
I think the hard part is answering that is if you said, if we had 150,000 people with our existing industrial base and in those areas, I think assuming that's static, we could probably get close. But to say, then you'd have to model changes in some of these other components. For example, our neighbor up north, they have Budweiser.
Yeah, well, but we toss this figure around 120,000 people at build-out all the time, with nothing said about the industrial bases or potential changes in our industrial base. And since I first heard that figure, I'm pretty sure we added several breweries. Oh, stop it. I think I'm entitled to an answer to this question.
Yeah, I mean, in the broader context of conservation, you could probably spread our water supply across a lot more people if you can control other variables, if that's the question you're asking.
My real question is, are you going to analyze this ever?
So can I just give my opinion here a little bit? What I've heard, and it was an answer, is that depending upon what that build-out comprises of, will determine what the rates will be and how much water we will be using or need to use. If a hospital comes in, again, they're going to use more water. If a brewery comes in, they're going to use more water. If a high-tech company comes in, they're going to use less. We don't know what that is going to involve in the future. That's the way I look at it. Just,
And I think the answer is yes. As we're doing this work, we will ask them to look at it. I think it's not going to be as certain and fixed and to say, here's what we can deal with, just knowing that there's other variables that will impact it.
Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Pack. Two quick questions. In this morning's Denver Post, there was a story about Arapahoe County and moving to a 300-year plan from a 100-year plan. Could you just educate at least me? I may be the only one who didn't read it carefully enough to arrive at an aha. And how does any of that relate to what we were talking about here with our master plan? That's one. I'll come back with a second one.
Yes, Mayor Peck and Councilmember Waters. The recent action that Arapahoe County took, most of the counties on the south and kind of southeast side of Denver, a lot of those communities rely on non-renewable groundwater as part or all of their water supply for some of those communities. There's a state law, and also most of the counties have a law that when you develop in those non-renewable groundwater areas, you can only extract enough water, you can only use the groundwater as your water supply, and extract enough water, 1/100th of the water per year, or basically have the groundwater last 100 years. Arapahoe County, and I'll be real honest, I don't think was a bad idea at all. They said, we want to make sure this water lasts 300 years, so they're only allowing the development community to extract 1/300th of the water that's in those aquifers. Really not real pertinent to Longmonth's because we have a renewable water supply.
Got it.
We do have a very robust policy around our water. Essentially, we use the 100-year drought as our.
Got it. The aha that I should have arrived at was, that's about aquifers as opposed to, our water supply. Got it. So here's I don't know if this, on slide 12, you had the reference to Water Smart, and I don't know if the question I'm going to ask in our fee in lieu, it falls into that heading or somewhere else in this, but it's part of the plan. We raised the fee in lieu payment for, correct me if I'm wrong, for annexed land. The request for annexation requires the dedication of 3 acre-feet of water per acre to be annexed, or the payment in lieu of $48,500, as I recall, per acre foot, and 3 times that per acre to be annexed. If I have that?
That's correct.
At the time, I raised a question about, will that apply to housing, right? And I was told, yes, it will, and it would require an ordinance to give the city manager the flexibility to waive, to go back to the original $18,000 per acre foot if it was a housing project. That's never come to us, so I'm assuming that there haven't been any annexations where that was an issue that would increase the cost of housing. So you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And then the related question is, Tuesday night, a week from now, there's a resolution and an ordinance on the agenda to annex Westview Acres, which I'll support. Can we be assured that the water, the 3 acre feet per acre in Westview Acres is donated, raw water? And if not, are we going to be charging the $48,500 times 3 per acre for that if if raw water is not donated?
Mayor Peck, Councilman Waters, how that works is at the time of annexation, you're only required to dedicate your historical water that is on the land. And I'd have to pull out the files to see exactly what their historical water is. Generally, that's around 2 acre-feet per acre on the average. And then at the time of platting, when you actually go to build the house, that's when you have to meet the full requirement of 3 acre-feet. So that remaining 1 acre-foot would be due at that point.
I got that, but it's still a relevant question to that annexation. Is raw water being donated, or is the developer going to be required to make the payment in lieu? And if they are are we going to waive that for the affordable stock, if that's going to be affordable or attainable stock? And the answer, I know the second question is no, because we haven't passed an ordinance. And then the question, why not? Because I still don't think, I think the water policy, which was the right call, given the cost of Chimney Hollow water and what we would be charged. But we've also said we shouldn't make any decision that obstructs our housing priority, our housing goals. And that one would, if the Westview Acres annexation doesn't bring with us the donation of raw water.
So on that question, if you remember a few meetings ago, we talked about bringing a host of things related to both affordable and attainable, of which this is one. It was actually as part of the ECIF, TCIF fees and bringing that in January, of which this is going to be part of that. So to Ken's point, if they donate the 2 acre feet upon annexation, and then they have the remaining parcel upon plat, you know, that's then when it would apply if the platting occurs after we bring all of those incentives to you. So that piece is part of a larger group of affordable and attainable incentives that we're going to bring to you in January that we talked about.
Okay, so just to be clear, we're going to make this decision next Tuesday night. Not knowing, I don't think I've heard whether or not, and it sounds like you don't know, so.
I haven't seen it.
So that's fair.
Yep.
But that's a question, maybe a week from tonight, I'll bring that question back.
And they'll be ready for it based on what you're asking.
All right, I'll raise it again then if I'm indulged to ask that question again. I just don't, I think it's, I've tried to make the point, I don't know if any, I've made it well, I guess, that it seems to me that the requirement for the raw water donation should not inflate the cost of housing that we're trying to get built for the people who need it most.
Are there any other discussion items from council? Seeing none, thank you very much. This is a good conversation, good discussion.
Super. Thank you for your time tonight.
So now we are at the mayor and council comments. Do you have any comments? Councilor Waters.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. One comment, I got a text during the meeting. I know I shouldn't be looking at my phone.
Caught you.
Yeah, I think I looked at it because I heard somebody else's phone signal that they got a text.
Mine's always
Just
ringing.
saying. So, but I appreciate the opportunity just to share. This was a thank you. It comes from somebody, most of us know Wendell Pickett. Says, I'm sorry I'm not there, but I'd like to express my thanks to Longmont Fire and Police. Apparently there was a fire in the business next to his, and he went to some length to talk about how extraordinary the performance of our fire and police department were in mitigating the effects and the damage and working with property owners and others in ways that he was very grateful. And I'm certain that's true of others. I'm not just, public acknowledgement, accolades for folks who are doing it every day in the ways we would expect. This is a real example.
Thank you. Let's see, who are we doing, Dave? Councilor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So I just have really one question, and this kind of, maybe I've been missing it in our packets and everything. What I've noticed since I've been on council, when we receive these packets and when there are studies done, we have a lot of consultants. And so my question is, I guess I would like to know how many of our consultants are consultants of color? Where are we getting our consultants? Are they all out of state? Just in the packet tonight, there are going to be 2 consultants for this, for the plan, moving forward. So I guess I just would like to know, I don't know if anybody else would like to know, I would like to know, out of all the consultants that the city hires, how many of those consultants are local and how many of those consultants are consultants of color? And I do understand that at one point after 2020 that we had some issues trying to find some consultants. But I just, for my own personal reasons, I would just like to know how many do we outsource? I know we outsource all our consultants, but how many are within the city of Longmont or Boulder County? How many are in the state of Colorado? And then how many of those are not in the state? And then how many of those are consultants of color? So I just was noticing that throughout all the packets that we receive with consultants.
Oh, I can work with Sandy to pull that. Yeah, purchasing will have to help us get that information.
Great. I don't see any remarks or comments from council, so city manager,
No comments. Mayor, council.
city attorney.
No comments, Mayor?
You're usually so talkative. What's up? So- Can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. We are adjourned. All in favor, aye. Aye, aye, aye.